We're here with Melissa Massello, editor-in-chief of Shoestring magazine, and a young journalist with a traditional journalism background who has successfully made the switch to online. Tell us about your background first as a journalist.
Thanks, Paul. So I went to journalism school. I trained as a print journalist at the University of New Hampshire, under the tradition that Donald Murray of the Boston Globe started there. And then worked as a newspaper reporter at the Portsmouth Herald and the Martha's Vineyard Times before September 11th happened, and everyone I knew lost their jobs in newspaper publishing. So I took some time. I worked at a startup magazine. I worked at a startup independent textbook publisher, and I became a startup junkie. I went back to Emerson for a year in magazine publishing and just realized that everything was going online. So I worked for 4 startups in 5 years.
All online startups,
yep.
Right?
Yep. A lot overlapping. I worked for great companies like in Boston called smartbargains.com. I worked for care.com in Waltham. I worked for a social networking site called nextcat.com. Really learned what it took to produce content and produce a website that had a viable business model, which is something that I think that is really important for a journalist to know, is about the business side of things.
When you was there a moment that you realized that shifting your career to online was really going to be the survival strategy?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, people have been, calling the death knell of print even when I started journalism school in '96. The writing seems to be on the wall that we need to adapt or change careers altogether. So I had always sort of had my eye on technology, tried to learn HTML, tried to learn what the e-commerce models were that were working on the web, and really that was sort of the impetus for going the startup route, was to learn what it took to be profitable online.
Now tell us about Shoestring Mag. What's that all about?
Shoestring magazine is a modern budget living magazine. We have about 140,000 readers every month. We produce content that helps people to save money and save the planet at the same time. Really kind of old-fashioned Depression-era wisdom that's just good, solid, reduce, reuse, recycle for the modern era.
And you're actually going back to the 1930s for some of the wisdom you're publishing these days, right?
Yeah, I was raised by Depression-era grandparents and great-aunts and uncles who, they wouldn't have called it recycling or environmentalism, but that's really what they were doing, getting the most use and the most value out of everything that they bought.
And you were how old?
How old am I?
Yeah.
31.
31. Okay, so you're looking back. You have a lot of students coming out of journalism school right now, maybe about 10 years younger than you. Can you share the experience, or what advice would you have for them based upon your experience getting into the field at the time when this big shift online was going on?
Well, I would say definitely hold hard and fast to that objective integrity and idealism of the journalism school is great at teaching people, but also take a vested interest in learning about business and especially learning about technology. If you don't have those two, tools in your kit, then and stay really on top of all of the advances, then you'll be replaced. It's a very, very, very competitive market out there, in what has always been a very, very, very competitive field. So stay on top of the trends.
And maybe you said on the business end, I mean, what do you, as the editor-in-chief, you're writing 6,000 words a week, but you also have responsibilities on the business side. What does that entail?
So soup to nuts, I run all of the operations of the magazine, which is interesting. Wearing all those hats is something that you learn to do very well at a startup, is to be very agile and react to the market very quickly. So it's interesting trying to be both editor, writer, publisher, ad sales manager, creative director sometimes, event planner, PR person, all of those at the same time, but it's also very rewarding, and you learn to compartmentalize.
Are you having fun?
I'm having a blast.
Well, thanks for your time today. Melissa Massello of Shoestring magazine.
Thanks, Paul.